Today, we're diving into a crucial chapter of the American Revolution that, honestly, is too often left in the margins. It's the story of the Oneida Nation and their alliance that might have saved the entire revolution from collapsing. Let's get right into it.
Okay, to really get how critical this was, you have to picture the brutal winter of 1777 at Valley Forge. And this isn't just some historical summary, that's a direct quote from George Washington himself. The commander-in-chief is describing an army that is literally falling apart, not from getting shot at, but from the cold.
And the human cost was just staggering. Over 2,000 soldiers died that winter. Let that sink in for a second. These weren't battle casualties. These were men dying from typhus, pneumonia, and just plain starvation. The American dream was on life support. This period was, without a doubt, the absolute darkest hour of the Revolutionary War. I mean, the army was trapped, they were frozen, they were starving, and all of this just 20 miles from Philadelphia, where the British were kicking back, warm and well-fed. The dream of independence was freezing to death in the snow.
This is the grim reality of what life was like. We're talking about men huddled in these crude log huts, wearing literal rags in sub-zero temperatures. Food was so scarce, they were boiling their own leather shoes for a little bit of nourishment. Can you even imagine? It was a complete and total nightmare.
So how in the world did they survive? Well, the answer doesn't come from Congress or from some miracle supply train. It comes from a powerful Native American Confederacy that was facing its own impossible choice. To get how the army was saved, we have to understand the incredibly complex world of the Iroquois.
You know, the Haudenosaunee, or the Iroquois Confederacy, they weren't just another tribe. They were a superpower. This was an alliance of 6 nations that basically controlled a huge territory and held the balance of power in North America. Whichever side they chose to support could literally determine the outcome of the war.
And this just lays out the bind they were in. On the one hand, siding with the British made a lot of sense. They had treaties, strong trade relationships. But on the other hand, the American cause had this powerful appeal, this struggle for liberty against a king far across the ocean, a feeling the fiercely independent Iroquois could definitely relate to. The Confederacy was split right down the middle. In the end, one nation made a choice that would change everything. The Oneida decided to back the revolution. And here's the crucial part. This decision didn't just pick a side in the war, it shattered the unity of the Iroquois Confederacy itself, breaking a peace that had lasted for centuries. So, that fateful decision leads us to one of the most remarkable and, frankly, unsung rescue missions in all of American history. The Oneida didn't just offer words of support. They took direct, life-saving action. Look at this number, 600 bushels. This wasn't some simple supply run with wagons and horses. This was corn from their own winter food supply, food they desperately needed for themselves, carried for hundreds of miles, on their backs, through a frozen wilderness to reach Washington's starving soldiers. And their help went so much deeper than just dropping off food. First, there was the incredible journey itself, a huge act of bravery. Second, the provisions were a true sacrifice. But third, and you can't miss this part, they brought knowledge. The soldiers had no idea how to prepare the corn they brought. Without the right cooking method, it was basically useless. And this is where the story becomes deeply personal. An Oneida woman named Polly Cooper. She didn't just drop off the supplies and head home. No way. She stayed at Valley Forge for months, working in the kitchens, teaching these starving, sick men how to cook the corn so their bodies could actually absorb the nutrients. She was as crucial to that army's survival as any general. But, and this is the really tragic turn in the story, this profound act of generosity and alliance came at a devastating cost. The Oneida's loyalty to the American cause would, in the end, lead to their own ruin. Siding with the Americans basically put a giant target on the Oneida's back. They were attacked by British Allied forces, which tragically included their own former Iroquois brothers. In the brutal Battle of Oriskany, Iroquois fought Iroquois. By 1780, their main village was burned to the ground, and they became refugees, dependent on the very army they had just saved. This timeline just lays the betrayal bare. It's staggering. In 1778, they are the saviors of the revolution. Just 5 years later, when the war ends, they're completely ignored in the peace treaty. Their land isn't protected, and within a few decades, they lose nearly all of their homeland to the very nation they helped bring into existence. And this brings us to the legacy of this alliance. a story about a debt that a new nation incurred, a debt that was almost immediately forgotten, and a story that thankfully is now being remembered. This powerful detail from Oneida oral history really captures the spirit of their alliance. After everything she did, the Army tried to pay Polly Cooper for her service, and she refused. She said she was there to support the cause of liberty. Her motive was about ideals, not about money. So instead of cash, she accepted a gift, a shawl and a bonnet, as a token of friendship and respect. And these items became treasures passed down through her family for generations, a physical reminder of a promise made between allies, a promise that the United States as a nation would utterly fail to keep. And that's the final injustice, isn't it? For centuries, this incredible story of sacrifice, of loyalty, of salvation, it was basically written out of the history books. We all learned about the heroic suffering at Valley Forge, but the Native American allies who made survival even possible, they were made invisible. So we end with this question. The Oneida carried more than just corn through that snow. They carried a belief in the promise of a new nation. Their story forces us to ask what it means to remember our history honestly, and what obligations carry over from one generation to the next. What debts does history demand we remember?